And hi again, everyone. Welcome to the fifth quarter right here on WKYC.com, part of our Three Browns series, our podcast series, as we look back on the Browns' 26-6 victory over the Chicago Bears from Sunday. I'm Dave DiNatale, along with Jay Crawford. And Jay, as we get into our opening drive here, this was an interesting game against the Bears on Sunday. Score-wise, it took a while for the Browns to get going, but when they did, they really poured it on.
Yeah, I was surprised at the lack of offense from the Bears. I mean, obviously, when you're going with the new starting quarterback, you never know what to expect. And Justin Fields just was not up to the task. I will say, though, I don't think the performance was indicative of Justin Fields so much as it was indicative of the Bears' anemic offensive line and the Browns pass rush that finally decided to find the switch and flip it. And that was the difference in the football game. 9 sacks. Obviously, that's a colossal performance. 4.5 from Myles Garrett, who kind of called out some of his teammates during the week and was critical of their play so far this season. And when you do that as a leader, you know this, Dino, you got to bring it. You've got to back it up. And the previous week, we talked about it last Monday, Myles wasn't in the box score. So right. I think Myles decided that, if I'm going to call anyone out, I have to do as I say. And he went out there and put on, I think, the best performance of his NFL career in the 4+ seasons he's been in the league. And we know that this defense has a lot of new parts. And I had mentioned after the week 1 loss that it is going to take some time. I figured it would take around week 8 to 10 before the sum of this defensive parts was operating as a whole unit. And I still think that there are things to clean up. But if this is the way this defense can play moving forward, it's going to be a long season for the rest of the AFC North because they were dominant and the Browns offense continues to click on all cylinders.
Yeah. One other thought about Garrett. On his last sack, on that 4.5 sack, they had him and Clowney loaded up on the same side of the defense, on the right side. I love that because all of a sudden now I think Jason Peters, the left tackle for the Bears, was completely confused. Okay, which one do I block? And he went for Clowney, and nobody bothered to block Garrett. And you're gonna call when you mix these guys around a little bit, you're going to cause some matchup problems.
Yeah, and that's what they have to do moving forward. I don't think we'll see that a ton. I think we'll see that in big situations. Obviously, the element of surprise is gone. Once you do that, the defense has kind of shown their hand, and opposing offensive coordinators know that that's a possibility. And when you see that on film, you now have to game plan against that. So you have to put in some sort of protection package when those two guys line up on the same side. Teams will be used to that. They'll have a plan for that moving forward. But I don't know how you stop it. I mean, you can game plan for anything. It doesn't mean you're going to be able to stop it. You've got 2 Hurricanes coming free on one side. It's going to make it very, very difficult to slide protect, particularly if you see it and you're not ready for it in the moment. You almost have to anticipate when the Browns are going to do that so you can sort of call that protection out in advance. But, this was a dominant defensive performance against a subpar offense. So we probably shouldn't get too far ahead of ourselves. There's no one on this Bears offense that strikes fear into the heart of defensive coordinators across the league. So they did what they were supposed to do, and that's a check. And then you move on to the next game. But just a couple of numbers to sort of put it into perspective. The Browns allowed 47 net yards, Dino, on 42 plays. That's a little more than a yard a play. And on third down, and that's when your bread is buttered. No question. You win in this league on third downs and turnover differential. The Bears had 11 third downs, and they converted once. Doesn't matter what you're doing offensively. When your defense is playing like that, you're going to win the game.
No doubt. No doubt. And that's good to see. We have talked about, this defense has got to get off the field. Got to get off the field on third downs. That's great to see. And the sports talk shows, Jay, this week, I think Joe Woods is his job is safe now.
Yeah.
After a tough couple of weeks.
Yeah, a couple of weeks. You know how this city is. You are as good as your last performance. But look, Joe's going to figure it out. It takes time when you're throwing all these new pieces in there together. It just takes time before you figure out what the right combination is. I think JOK proved yesterday that he's going to likely end up being the steal of last draft. When you let a player of that caliber slip into the 50s, he was everywhere yesterday, played a terrific game, and he's just scratching the surface. So you shore up that middle. The defensive secondary is coming together. I think that by week 8 or 9, this defense is going to be in the top 10 in the NFL. I firmly believe that.
Well, that will be huge if that's the case. Let's look at on our touchdown segment, our biggest takeaways, our best takeaways from this 26-6 win. Where do you start when you think about that?
I have 3, and we've touched on one, so I'll make that one number 3. But I'm going to start with balance and the kicking game and then the defense. Here's what I mean by balance. So when you look at the weapons the Browns have with Hunt and Chubb and now Odell Beckham, it's going to be very difficult to spread the ball evenly around to those 3. I thought the Browns did that yesterday about as well as they can. Chubb was the leading ball carrier. I think he had 22 carries for 84 yards. So he's still the leading ground carrier. Hunt did most of his damage with the swing pass, the screen passes. So, I think he had 82 yards rushing, but added like 74 in the receiving game. That screen game that we heard so much about during training camp, that the Browns had clearly implemented a screen game package specifically for Hunt. That play is going to be a nightmare for opposing defenses because when he gets the ball in space, he's dangerous. But when he gets the ball in space and he has 300-pounders leading the way for him, it's almost unstoppable. That ball is going to move 20, 25, 30 yards down the field. And I wouldn't be surprised if he takes a couple of screens to the house this year because once he gets into the back of the defense, it's very difficult to bring him down. So I thought the balance was very, very on point. Odell Beckham was 2 thumbs up in his return. No doubt. The leading receiver in terms of yardage. I think he had 9 targets. That might be a little on the high side for me. But obviously with no Jarvis Landry out there, you're going to use your best receiver a little bit more. I thought he looked in midseason form. His cuts were sharp. His routes were tight. It was clear the Bears weren't going to let him get behind their defense and do any damage deep. But Baker took what they gave him. He had 9 targets. I think he had 5 receptions. So I'm fine with all of that. And again, we talked about this throughout the week last week. His presence is going to open up the running game, and we saw that. Yeah. Also, when you play fake now, you keep the back ends of defenses more honest, and it just opens up everything. I'd like to see the Browns mix in the tight ends a little bit more than they did yesterday. I think Njoku can be a bigger factor. Bryant and Hooper, I think those guys probably have a little bit more to give than we saw yesterday, but that's okay. You take what the defense gives you. The kicking game was outstanding. I mean, Chase McLaughlin, I think he had 2 long ones, including a 57-yarder. He was 4 for 4. That's always been a question mark for the Browns over the 10 years. I don't know. I mean, since we lost our mainstay, I think we've solidified that position. So I like that. And we talked at length on the defense. Couple of numbers, Dino, on the offense, and this speaks to the balance. 26 points now in each of the 3 games, at least 26 points. In this league, that's good enough for a W 8 out of 10, maybe 9 out of 10 weeks. So if you just keep scoring in the high 20s, low 30s, the wins are going to take care of themselves. 86 points, that is through 3 games, 86 points is the most the Browns have scored going back to 2002. And if you look at it from yardage, they have 1,250 net offensive yards this year. That's averaging more than 400 net yards of offense per game. That is the best in the Browns franchise going back to 1964.
Okay.
So it's working.
It's working. I love it.
Yeah.
All right. So on the flip side then, what didn't work yesterday?
Well, I thought it was pretty clear. I only have one thing, really, and that was the offensive line's protection. They didn't give Baker the time that he needs to throw, particularly on 3rd down. Early in the game, and I hate to throw this in here because Kevin Stefanski's doing such a great job. He's now 8-2 in his first 10 games at home as the coach of the Browns. So this is such a minor thing. But for me, I think the decision-making was a little questionable in some of those early fourth down tries. So on the first three of those, we had 2 fourth and shorts and a 3rd and short early in the game. On those 3 plays, Chubb never touched the ball. Baker was sacked on 2 of those 3 opportunities. Look, you're a run team and you've got the best run game in the NFL. When you're 4th and 1, don't overthink it. Put the ball in your horse's hands and let him grind out that yard. I think the Bears were ready for what we were doing. They clearly were. They sent a lot and they sacked Baker on those 2 fourth down tries. So the decision-making at times was, it's always easy to second guess. If we were in a close game late, those decisions would have been highlighted a lot more than they were. You win, so you sort of write them off and forget about them. But against great teams in close situations, I'd like to see a higher percentage play called, and maybe even in a few instances, take the points. The 3 points are there. Twice you go for it on 4th and short when you're in field goal range. You get nothing. The high-end risk is you get 14. The sure thing is you get 6. You just take those field goals when they're there for you. And again, the offensive line protection, it's got to be better. I know Wills is battling an injury. Really, the whole offensive line seems to be dinged up.
Yes.
But they've got to be better. Now, I know the Bears get after quarterbacks pretty good, but, we're going to see some defenses later this year that are going to take advantage of what they were able to see on tape yesterday that the Bears provided. So clean up that offensive line. But honestly, that's about it.
Yeah, I wonder if Chris Hubbard were healthy, if the Browns wouldn't think about sitting Jed Wills for a week or so or 2 and let him heal up that ankle. But, it's a lot to ask Blake Hance, who's normally a guard and not a tackle, to have your 3rd stringer to protect Baker's blind side. So, if Wills can walk, it seems like they're putting him out there, and he said he wants to play. So
that's a big ask. It really is. And I know it's a tough situation, but you got to make the most of it. But I think you're right. If Hubbard were healthy, I think they probably would. This is an injury, the kind of injury that Wills has. This is a kind of thing that's probably going to show up on the injury report the rest of the year.
Yes.
That, when you're carrying 325 pounds on an injured ankle and you're practicing and you're on it all week, it's tough for that thing to ever heal. So I think he's going to be carrying that for the rest of the season. Let's hope it doesn't, progress into something worse than it is now. But, at this point, you kind of circle the bye week and you hope that you can get to that point. And that really would probably be the only chance for him to have a nice break to try to get that thing healthy. But by and large, if the only thing we're picking fault at the end of a win is the offensive line's protection of the quarterback, I think we're in good shape.
Yeah, I would agree. As we look at notables, anything kind of out of the box stand out to you from what the Browns did yesterday, of what they've done here, maybe these last 2 weeks?
Well, I mentioned Jeremiah Owusu Koromoa. Is that how you say it? Do I have that right?
J-O-K. Yep.
J-O-K is so much easier. I mentioned him, and I'd like to spend a little bit more time on him just because I think they had the great first preseason game, and then he sort of took a step back. I think what I saw from him yesterday was confidence. There was a play, and I was glad they highlighted it during the game telecast. I thought they did a really nice job of pointing this out. JOK was in pass protection, but when he saw that they weren't sending more guys than the Browns could cover, and he had a clear gap and lane to the quarterback, he took it. And you oftentimes don't see a young player take that liberty, but he made the assessment in real time and felt there's little I can do here in pass defense. I've got a lane to the quarterback. He doesn't know I'm coming. I'm going to go get him. And he did. So I thought that was, it doesn't show up in the box score necessarily, but that confidence in his game to make those decisions in real time, I think that's going to be a sign for him and his progression moving forward. He's a terrific player. He has all of the tools. His skill set is there. I think he's going to fit into this defense marvelously. So I really wanted to point him out in the notables. I just think that he's going to be tremendous moving forward. I know Newsome left the field. I think it was an ankle injury late.
Yeah.
That's a little bit of a concern because remember, he had some soft tissue injury history at Northwestern. And when you look around in our defensive secondary, we've got some guys in Greedy Williams and Ward, and I think even Newsome that are a little undersized and have a history of being dinged. So that's my big concern is how that unit can hold up. But I thought he made a couple of nice plays in coverage yesterday. So, some of these young defensive parts, and Jadeveon Clowney, obviously not a young part, but a new part. Jadeveon Clowney is still the player we always thought he was. So these pieces are coming together. And as these gears move and those teeth start to align, it's going to be really difficult for opposing defenses because they're figuring out week to week what works and what doesn't. And Joe is going to have this thing ironed out by the middle of the season, and that's going to spell trouble for the rest of the league.
Yeah, wait till when they get Anthony Walker back to kind of lead the linebacking core, and you can put JOK on one side of them, and whether you have Wilson, Taki, or whoever else on the other side, you've got something there, no doubt.
Absolutely.
We'll get to the Vikings as we go to the 2-minute drill here. But I wanted to bring up the Bengals beat the Steelers pretty handily at Heinz Field yesterday. And now all of a sudden there's some talk and we've heard this before, but he's also getting older. Are we witnessing the decline now finally of Ben Roethlisberger?
Yeah, this is it. This is the trail into the sunset that every quarterback fears. And to be fair, we saw it coming last year when after the red hot start and that offensive line sort of broke down, their run game disappeared and it all went to Ben. And that's, I think, why we were able to beat them twice in back-to-back weeks, last week of the regular season in the playoffs, because Ben's not that guy anymore. He's still a serviceable quarterback. He's still going to make great plays in the clutch, but he's not the guy that you throw the keys to the machine to and say, take us there, Ben. Because it's too big of an ask now. So I'm glad you brought up the division because the one thing I wanted to touch on here in 2-minute drill was the Ravens.
Yeah.
That's an L yesterday. I'm sorry. That's an L.
Yep.
And the league's apology phone call to the Lions this morning would not cut it if I'm the head coach of the Detroit Lions, because clearly that was a delay of game. I know that the officials will give the ball and the clock a little bit of leeway, but it was almost 2 full seconds where that ball was still on the ground and the play clock hit 0. So now it's not a 67-yard field goal. It's a 72-yard field goal, and you have to run the Hail Mary.
Right.
And, some might say you had a better chance at a Hail Mary than you did a 67-yard field goal. But with Tucker, I never rule anything out with that guy. 66 yards, whatever it was. The guy's a freak. He needed every single ounce of energy he put into that kick to make it. But I think the Ravens should be 0-3 right now.
Yeah.
I think if the Chiefs don't implode in that game, I think the Chiefs beat the Ravens. And so the Ravens are sitting in dead last at 0-3, if not for 2 lucky breaks. Instead, they're tied with us for first at 2-1. I like the way the division is shaping up. I really do. I think that, all things are lining up for the Browns to be the class of this division. I still think that the Ravens, with the injuries at running back, look, as long as they have the quarterback that they have back there, it's going to be a long, hard game against the Ravens because Jackson can make so many things happen. But I think the Browns are the class of the division. I really do. And Minnesota is going to be interesting this weekend. They just went to Seattle. I'm not sure if that was in Seattle or Minnesota. Either way, they beat a good Seahawks team.
Yes.
And they beat them pretty soundly. Now, I know the Seahawks defense is borderline horrible, but the Browns have to find a way to win road games if you want to, be at home in the playoffs. And this is one that they should have. So let's see what happens in Minnesota.
Yeah. We talked about Kevin Stefanski. You brought up the great number. I mean, he's 8-2 at home, but yeah, you got it. These are these types of road games where you're going to have to face a pretty good quarterback, a pretty good offense. And I'm excited to see how the defense builds on what they did against the Bears, against an offense that's going to be a lot more difficult to shut down.
Yeah, I am too, and I think it's gonna be a good test for the Browns. First of all, the road game; it's always a hostile environment in Minnesota, so I think that's going to be a nice yardstick game to see sort of where we are here as we approach the quarter pole, what used to be the quarter pole. But get a W. I love what Stefanski said in the locker room after the game. Find a way to go 1-0. That's what you're doing. You've got 17 seasons, and you just got to find a way to go 1-0. And, interesting with the Chiefs now sitting where they are at 1-2. I mean, that is likely the team that you're going to have to battle for if you want to be at home through the playoffs. Now, granted, they've got the huge advantage of the head-to-head win against the Browns. That's why they celebrated the way they did against Cleveland. They knew what that game meant. Cleveland now has to finish a game better than Kansas City in the standings to have any tiebreakers. The Bills yesterday flexed their muscle. They're clearly at the top of the conference. So, we are pretty much where we thought we would be right now. Let's hold serve, win a couple that we're not supposed to, and hope we can stay healthy.
Yeah, and don't lose any that we're not supposed to.
That's key.
That's it. Jay, we'll see you 5:00 on What's New on 3 News this afternoon. Look forward to seeing you break this one down a little bit more. And also read Jay's column talking about Myles Garrett and the Browns at WKYC.com. My friend, it is always a pleasure. Thank you so much.
You bet. Good to be with you. We'll see you next Monday.
All right. For Jay Crawford, I'm Dave DiNatale. Thanks for watching the fifth quarter right here on WKYC.com.